There's a kind of knock that doesn't ask, it commands. That's what echoed through my garage that Tuesday afternoon. I was wrist-deep in gun oil, cleaning my grandfather's old Remington, when I looked up and thought, here we go. Standing on my porch was a woman who looked like a budget lawyer Barbie, waving the clipboard like it was a warrant. I hadn't felt this much tension since Ranger School. I'd come back to Heritage Hills for peace, physical, mental, all of it. Thought teaching high school might be the quiet chapter of my life. Turns out, I was laughably wrong. If you've never seen what happens when a pretend authority figure runs into someone who spent 12 years training top-tier soldiers, buckle up. This wasn't about barking dogs or lawn violations. This was a whole different beast. I was in my garage that afternoon, same routine as always, carefully cleaning each part of that rifle, just like I used to teach recruits. That Remington's a classic, a 1940s model passed down from my grandfather, a World War II vet who raised me on respect, discipline, and fixing what matters. The smell of oil, the rhythm of the process, it helped silence everything that still echoed. Inside my head, then came the pounding, not knocking pounding. That kind of angry, overcompensating hammering that tries to mask insecurity with noise. I checked the peephole and saw her straight out of a real estate disaster magazine. Pink blazer brighter than a hazard cone, hair teased like a 90s infomercial, and enough plastic jewelry to blind someone. She had a clipboard and a fake smile, the kind that said she thought this was her moment. "Good afternoon, Mr. Whitaker," she said like she rehearsed it in front of a mirror. "I'm Brittany Crow with Enforce Sure LLC, Heritage Hills HOA Enforcement Division." She lifted the clipboard like she was revealing a magic sword, expecting me to flinch. Next to her stood a guy trying real hard to look tough, bad security. Uniform, blank stare, name tag reading Troy Bennett. He was built like a linebacker, but everything about him screamed, weekend mall cop. I've dealt with enough real enforcers to know when someone's faking it. "I'll need to inspect your firearms storage to verify HOA compliance," she said, poking the clipboard toward me. That's when I saw its logo was off-center. The seal looked like it came from a sticker book. It was all smoke and mirrors. "Ma'am, I'll need valid ID and verified authority before you inspect anything," I said evenly. I wasn't being aggressive, just direct. Training taught me never to reveal too much too soon, and my gut told me something was off. Her face flushed instantly, and Troy stiffened like he was ready to go WWE on my porch. "This is proper documentation," she snapped, shaking the clipboard. "Refuse and we'll return with a court order and law enforcement backup. Don't make this worse for yourself." Her words were threats, but her voice cracked with uncertainty. I'd heard enough bluffs to know when someone's hand was empty. "I understand," I said calmly, "but I'll need to confirm this with the HOA." I gave her a polite nod and began closing the door. "You folks have a good day." Then I headed straight for the kitchen window. Sure enough, Brittany and Troy were having a full-on argument beside their car. She was waving her arms like she'd lost a debate, and he kept scanning the area like someone expecting to get caught. The car itself was a beat-up sedan with a dented bumper and no markings. Definitely not what you'd expect from an official enforcement vehicle. I smelled a con, so I grabbed my phone. I called Eleanor Green across the street. Eleanor's 73, smarter than most lawyers, and worked in the county courthouse for over 3 decades. If there was anyone who knew the real HOA sin in Heritage Hills, it was her. "Eleanor, it's Dean," I said. "Some folks just showed up at my door, claiming they're with HOA enforcement." "Know anything about that?" Long pause on the other end. When she spoke, her voice dropped low. "Dean, honey, we don't have an HOA enforcement team. Never have. And from the sound of it, I think I know who you just met. That woman's a known scam artist." Her words hit me like a cold splash of water. My instincts fired up. "Tell me everything," I said, grabbing a notebook and sitting down. Eleanor didn't skip a beat. Her name's Brittany Crow. Used to be a realtor till she got caught in dirty deals. Lost her license. That company she mentioned? Enforced. Sure. It's just a shell legally registered as Home Ornaments Advisory. Not exactly Homeland Security. I thanked her and opened my laptop. I had the skills military background, document forensics. I knew where to dig. What I uncovered was a goldmine of fraud. Brittany Crow had a history, bankruptcies, fake businesses, over $200,000 in debt. But the kicker? She'd filed 3 bogus ATF complaints in 6 months, each one targeting gun owners, all dismissed after investigations. My theory? She was going after collectors to steal high-value weapons. Her partner, Troy Bennett, wasn't any cleaner. Fired from 3 security jobs, probation for assault, and surprised Brittany's boyfriend. These 2 weren't official anything. They were grifters, and reckless ones at that, which made them unpredictable, dangerous. I started planning how to shut this down properly. The next morning, I was reviewing everything I'd found when my doorbell camera chimed. I checked the feed. Brittany was back this time in a navy blazer, plastered with fake badges like she raided a Halloween clearance bin. No Troy. Just her, clutching a bigger stack of papers and wearing a grin like she'd just won a court case. "Mr. Whitaker," she shouted through the door. "I'm here with a court order requiring immediate inspection of your firearms. Open the door or I'll call the police." Her tone was firm, but I could hear it, the edge of desperation. I opened the door and took the document she thrust at me and nearly lost it laughing. This woman had actually tried to pass off a fake court order typed in Comic Sans. Comic Sans. I've seen finger-painted kindergarten newsletters that looked more official. "Ma'am, I have to ask what court issued this order?" I asked, trying my best not to burst out laughing. The County Court of Heritage Hills," she said, clearly inventing as she went. "Judge Thompson signed it personally." Judge Thompson, that was cute. Our county judges are Martinez, Johnson, and Wu. There was no Thompson, and definitely no County Court of Heritage Hills. This area falls under Travis County jurisdiction. But the real kicker? The signature. I've seen enough forged paperwork to spot a fake from 10 feet away, and this was bad, like she practiced writing Judge Thompson 5 times, then went with her least embarrassing attempt. "I'm going to need to verify this with the court," I said, pulling out my phone. Her face stiffened instantly. "You can't do that," she snapped. "This is an active investigation. Interfering could be considered obstruction of justice." That's when I knew she was cornered. Real law enforcement never panics when you want to verify documents. They expect it. I made a big show of dialing the courthouse, watching her face cycle through 6 shades of crimson. "Hello, Travis County Courthouse. I'd like to verify a court order supposedly signed by Judge Thompson." Brittany's eyes went wide. She took an instinctive step back. "You know what, Mr. Whitaker? I think there may have been a mix-up. I'll just head back to the office and double-check the paperwork. We'll be in touch." She bolted, clutching her fake documents like they might vanish if she let go. I stayed on the line. "Actually, never mind about that court order," I told the clerk. "But can you confirm, do we have a Judge Thompson in Travis County?" "No, sir," the clerk replied without hesitation. "And if someone's showing you fake court orders, you should probably call the sheriff." The next day, in my senior American history class, I found a way to turn this mess into a lesson. "The difference between law and morality," I explained, "is that law is what people in power tell you to do. Morality is what you know is right. Sometimes they match, sometimes they don't. Your job as citizens is to know the difference." One of my students raised her hand. "Mr. Whitaker, what made you think of this today?" I smiled. Let's just say the lessons come to us when we least expect them. That evening, I decided it was time to go on offense. No more waiting for Brittany to make her next move. I picked up the fake business card she left and called the number. "This is Dean Whitaker," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. I want to cooperate with the HOA requirements. Could you come by this weekend for the official inspection? I'd like to get this resolved quickly." It was bait, pure and simple. Time. To find out just how deep their con ran and to start building the case to end it. By Friday afternoon, I was in my garage going through my usual routine, cleaning and organizing my grandfather's gun collection, when something stopped me cold. Tucked behind the air filter unit was a small wireless camera, no bigger than a quarter, practically invisible unless you knew what to look for. I recognized the model, a cheap spy cam you can buy online for under $50. The kind of thing sketchy boyfriends or amateur crooks use. But finding it here meant Brittany and Troy hadn't just picked me at random. They'd been watching, studying my habits, probably inventorying everything they could glimpse through the windows. This wasn't just a scam, it was targeted. A full-blown operation. I left the camera in place but started changing my behavior, blocking its view when handling anything valuable, watching my words. And then I installed my own surveillance. 3 well-hidden cameras covering the front porch, driveway, and entryway. Audio equipment too. If Brittany and Troy wanted to play, I'd make sure every second of it was recorded. I also called Eleanor and asked if she'd serve as a witness. "Honey," she said with a grin, "I've waited 40 years for someone to ask me to help catch some crooks." Saturday morning dawned cold and clear, perfect weather for trouble. At exactly 10 a.m., Brittany's junker sedan pulled into my driveway, but she didn't come alone. Troy was with her, sunglasses on like a B-movie villain, and 2 other folks I hadn't seen before. They looked uncertain, nervous even. Brittany had upgraded her costume, fake badge, utility belt that looked straight out of a costume aisle. Troy was going for intimidating, but landed closer to mall cop on a caffeine crash. "Mr. Whitaker," she called out as they walked up, "we're here for the official compliance inspection. I trust your firearms are properly secured and documented according to HOA regulations." I invited them in, making sure to lead them right through the camera's sweet spots. The 2 newcomers introduced themselves as Mike and Sarah. From their body language and confusion, I could tell they weren't in on the con. They kept calling Brittany's supervisor and asking vague questions about what exactly they were inspecting. My guess? They thought they'd signed up for a real job. It was becoming clear they weren't co-conspirators. They were pawns. Just like Brittany and Troy had hoped I'd be. Probably folks desperate for work who'd answered some bogus job listing and were now being used as window dressing to make Brittany's scam look more legitimate. "Before we begin," I said, pulling out my phone, "I'd like to record this. Inspection for my own records. I hope that's not a problem." Troy stepped forward instantly, hand drifting toward his belt like he was armed with more than attitude. "That won't be necessary," he growled, trying hard to sound official. "This is part of an active investigation. Recording could compromise the process. Mistake number 1. Real law enforcement encourages recordings. It protects everyone involved. The only people who hate being recorded are the ones doing something illegal." "Actually, Texas is a one-party consent state," I said coolly, "which means I can record any conversation I'm part of. And since this is my property, I have every right to document what happens here." Brittany shot Troy a look that could have vaporized steel. He was jumping the gun, and she knew it. "Let's just get this over with," she snapped, flipping through her clipboard like it contained the Constitution. "We'll need to see all firearms, ammunition, and storage systems. Also, we received a report of unlicensed high-value items, so we'll need to inventory those too." There it was, the real agenda. This wasn't about compliance, it was a scouting mission. They wanted to catalog everything worth stealing. "I'm also going to need you to pay the inspection fee," Brittany added, not missing a beat. $8,000 to cover processing and compliance enforcement. $8,000 for a fake inspection from fake agents with fake documents. I had to give them points for boldness, even as I mentally checked off the growing list of felonies. That's when I heard the sweetest voice imaginable, Eleanor, calling from the front door. "Dean, honey, I brought those as papers you asked for, the real ones." She stepped inside with a thick manila folder and an expression that said she was about to enjoy herself immensely. "Oh my," she said, all innocence. "Am I interrupting something official?" What I didn't know then was that Eleanor had already made a phone call that would change everything. Brittany was about to make the mistake that would bring her whole operation crashing down. Chaos descended fast. Brittany started punching at her phone, no doubt trying to summon her imaginary reinforcements. I kept Troy in frame of my cameras, watching every move. Mike and Sarah were frozen against my living room wall, clearly regretting every decision that had brought them here. And Eleanor? Eleanor was standing in the doorway like an amused theater critic, holding a front row seat to the worst performance of the year. "You need to leave now," Brittany barked, trying to reassert control over a situation that had long since outpaced her ability to manage it. "This is an active law enforcement operation. Civilian interference is a federal offense." Eleanor looked at her with the kind of smile reserved for toddlers who just tried to explain how babies are made. "Sweetheart," she said in her warmest grandmother voice, "I worked in the county courthouse for 32 years. I know what a law enforcement operation looks like. And this?" She flipped open her folder and pulled out a crisply printed document on official letterhead. "This isn't it. These are the actual HOA bylaws for Heritage Hills," she continued, "filed with the county and properly notarized. Would you like me to read the part about firearms?" Brittany's silence answered for her. It states, and I quote, "Individual property owners maintain full authority over personal possessions within their homes, subject only to federal and state law." Brittany was visibly deflating. "Also," Eleanor added, flipping another page, "any inspection must be requested in writing, with 72 hours notice, and may only be conducted by licensed professionals with verified bonding and insurance. Do you have those credentials, dear?" Troy was getting twitchy, so I subtly adjusted my position to keep him perfectly in frame. "You're making a mistake, man," he said, his tone rising. "We've got backup coming. When they get here, you'll be sorry." And then he blew it. Trying too hard to sound menacing, he said the one thing that confirmed everything I'd suspected. "Brittany's got this whole thing scripted," he snapped. "She gave us lines to read, told us exactly what to say so people would pay up." The room went dead quiet. Brittany looked like she'd just been punched in the soul. You could see every emotion on her face: shock, rage, disbelief, and panic. Mike and Sarah exchanged wide-eyed looks that said, "Oh God, we've been part of a scam." "Troy, you absolute," Brittany shrieked, throwing her clipboard down. "Shut your mouth right now." But it was too late. The curtain had dropped. The scam was exposed, and everyone could see the strings. Eleanor, bless her heart, calmly scribbled in a little spiral notebook like she was preparing a court summary. Mike was edging toward the door, while Sarah took out her phone, probably to call someone who could tell her what the hell she'd just walked into. "Ma'am," I said to Brittany, steady and composed, "I think it's time we called the actual authorities and let them handle this." That's when I heard its sirens in the distance, growing louder. "You called the cops?" Brittany shrieked, her voice hitting frequencies that could stun wildlife. Eleanor chuckled, holding up her phone like a winning lottery ticket. "Actually, dear, I called them 20 minutes ago, when I saw this circus setting up in Dean's driveway. You see, I recognized you from the Pine Valley HOA President's warning last month. She circulated a description when your little scam hit their neighborhood. The sirens were nearly on top of us now. Flashing lights danced across my front window. Officer Mallister will be here shortly, Eleanor added conversationally. Used to be a Marine, just like Dean. He's very interested in folks who impersonate law enforcement. As if on cue, a police cruiser turned into the driveway. That's when Brittany, in a final act of desperation, made one last wild move. She yanked a thick folder from her oversized purse and held it aloft like it was Excalibur. "I have evidence." She screamed toward the front door. "Evidence that this man is trafficking illegal weapons." "I've been investigating him for weeks," Brittany declared, waving the folder like it contained national secrets. "He's got enough weapons in there to arm a small militia, and none of it's properly registered." It was a bold move. I had to give her that. Unfortunately for Brittany, it was also wildly incorrect and about to backfire in spectacular fashion. Officer Mallister was about 6'2", broad-shouldered, and carried himself like someone who hadn't let his time in the Marines fade into a memory. When he stepped through my front door, he took in the scene quickly, Troy looking like he was trying to disappear, Brittany clinging to her folder like a life raft, and Eleanor standing calmly with her notebook, channeling seasoned reporter energy. His expression cycled through confusion, then recognition as our eyes met, and finally what I could only describe as amused professionalism as the picture came into focus. "Afternoon, folks," he said in a steady, no-nonsense voice that immediately commanded the room. "I'm Officer Mallister. Someone want to explain what's going on here." The entire mood in the room shifted the moment he spoke. Brittany's desperation surged, and I could see her scrambling to steer the narrative before it slipped entirely out of her hands. "Officer, thank God you're here," she said, flipping the switch to high drama. "This man assaulted my security supervisor during a routine HOA inspection. We have evidence he's been storing illegal weapons." "Ma'am," Mallister interrupted, holding up a hand while turning to me. "Aren't you Dean Whitaker? The guy who used to train Rangers down at Fort Benning?" I nodded. "That's right. Rick Mallister," he said, reaching out to shake my hand. "We met during that joint training op in Georgia, must have been 6 years ago. You ran that workshop on document forgery detection. Small world." "It's getting smaller by the minute," I replied, keeping one eye on Troy, who seemed to have wisely decided staying put was his best strategy. "Speaking of forgery, you might want to take a look at the paperwork these folks brought with them." Eleanor stepped forward, her face lit with the satisfaction of someone who just found the winning lottery ticket. "Officer Mallister, I've documented 17 distinct violations of state and federal law in the last half hour," she said crisply. "They've impersonated law enforcement, presented falsified legal documents, attempted extortion, and based on that young man's confession, they've been running this scam in multiple communities." Brittany's face had gone from red to white to a color somewhere between celery and seasick. "Now hold on just a second," she stammered, trying to reclaim control. "I have proof this entire thing is being misrepresented." She yanked open her folder and started tossing out grainy long-lens photos of me in my garage, clearly snapped from a distance. "He's been stockpiling weapons. I've filed reports with federal authorities. This is a matter of public safety." "Ma'am," Mallister said, the edge in his voice sharp enough to cut drywall, "before you go any further, you should know I served 8 years in the Marines before becoming a cop. I know what legal gun ownership looks like. And I definitely know what forged paperwork looks like. From where I'm standing, Mr. Whitaker isn't the one with explaining to do." Mike and Sarah, who had mostly been furniture up to this point, finally found their voices. "Officer," Mike said, nervously rubbing his arm, "we answered a job ad for security consultants. We thought we were doing insurance inspections or something. We didn't know this was." "It's okay," Mallister said, his tone softening. "You're not under arrest. Why don't you two step outside while I sort this out?" They fled the room like it was on fire, probably already rehearsing how they were going to explain their accidental life of crime to friends and family. Troy, still on the floor, had officially entered the statue phase. Brittany, however, was just warming up. I demand to speak to your supervisor. She snapped like she thought she was in a courtroom drama. This is a cover-up, and I won't be silenced by some small-town conspiracy. Eleanor actually laughed full-on. Out loud laughed and began flipping through her notebook. Sweetie, she said, you're about to be silenced by about 15 criminal charges. She started counting on her fingers. Let's see. Impersonating law enforcement. Felony. Producing fake legal documents. Felony. Attempted extortion. Another felony. Oh, and that hidden camera you left in Dean's garage? That's breaking and entering, sweetheart. She turned the page with theatrical flair. And based on what your boyfriend just told us? Conspiracy to commit fraud across multiple jurisdictions. Mallister was now holding the forged court order, scrutinizing it like an art appraiser examining a knockoff. Comic Sans, he muttered, eyebrows raised. And this signature? He looked up, visibly disappointed. Ma'am, did you seriously think this would fool anyone? He exhaled, shaking his head. We've had 3 other communities report similar scams in the past year. Always the same script: phony HOA inspections, fake documents, targeting gun owners. The ATF's been following this trail for months. That's when Brittany played her so-called ace. It doesn't matter what you think, she said, her voice once again rising with forced conviction. I've already filed a complaint with the AF about his illegal weapon stash. They're probably on their way right now. The room went silent. You could practically hear the gears turning as everyone processed what she'd just claimed. Mallister looked over at me, then back at her, eyebrows raised. Ma'am, he said slowly, carefully, are you saying you filed a false report with federal authorities? It's not false. Brittany shrieked. I have proof. I have photos. You have nothing but trouble, Eleanor interrupted, scribbling in her notebook. Faking reports to federal agencies is a felony, and according to my call to the ATF, you've done it 3 times since January. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Brittany gaped like a fish tossed onto dry land, mouth working, no words coming out. Troy groaned from the floor like a man praying to sink through it. Officer Mallister shot Eleanor a look of newfound respect. Then came the growl of an SUV pulling up. Government plates. 2 suits stepped out, moving like men who didn't need to flash badges to prove authority. Well, Mallister muttered, peering through the blinds, guess we're about to see how crazy this gets. Brittany's face lit up like she'd hit the jackpot. Told you they'd come. Now you'll see who's lying. What she didn't know, what she couldn't, was that I recognized one of them. The older agent was a stranger. The younger one, though early 30s, still military fit, eyes like a hawk, I knew him. They walked in like they owned the room. The older agent's badge read Williams. The younger one locked onto me and grinned. Sergeant Whitaker? He said. Dean Whitaker, 3rd Battalion? Then it hit me. Mike Barrett, former student, counter-fraud specialist. Hell of a time to catch up. Barrett, I said, shaking his hand. Didn't expect you here. William's gaze sharpened. You 2 know each other? Sergeant Whitaker trained me, Barrett said. If he says it's a con, it's a con. Brittany's triumph crumbled. Her fingers dug into her folder like it was a lifeline. No, this isn't how this works. She sputtered. I filed reports. I have evidence. Williams took the folder and flipped through it. His expression barely shifted, but his eyes said everything. Unimpressed. This is your smoking gun? He asked, holding up a grainy photo. Proves your hands shake when you take pictures. He owns too many guns, Brittany insisted. And meets with criminals. Eleanor sighed like a judge delivering a verdict. You mean the vets group he runs, or his history students? The man teaches high school, for God's sake. Barrett crouched by the fake court orders, eyebrow raised at the Comic Sans font. Williams just pinched the bridge of his nose. "Miss Crow," he said flatly, "did you really think this would fool the feds?" N4 Sure LLC, a security firm registered as a home decor business. Bold choice. Barrett tapped the garage monitor. "How long were they surveilling you, Sarge?" "3 days, I said. "Found their camera Friday. Wanted to see how far they'd go." Both agents exchanged a look. "Case closed." "This is illegal." Brittany shrieked. "He was spying on us." "On him," Mallister corrected dryly. "Letting crooks dig their own grave isn't entrapment, it's smart policing. What is illegal is your entire operation." Then Troy exploded. "This was Brittany's plan." He yelped. "She said we'd scare gun guys into paying fines. I didn't know she'd drag the feds into it." Silence. Again. Barrett and Williams shared a nod. Brittany looked ready to strangle Troy. Eleanor's pen raced across her pad. I marveled at how 2 people so dedicated to scheming hadn't just gotten honest jobs. "Right," Williams said, snapping cuffs open. "We're done here." What came next was karma at warp speed. Williams called for backup. Barrett bagged every forged document. Mallister cuffed Troy, reciting rights like a bored auctioneer. Brittany collapsed onto my couch, hollow-eyed. Eleanor dialed a number. "Sweaty," she said. "You gotta hear what's going down at Dean's. Beats the raccoon thing." Williams pulled out a thick case file. Real evidence, not Brittany's scrap paper. "Drama." He sat across from her, voice calm as a blade. "Miss Crow," he said, "let's discuss the last 6 months of your life. Every one of those complaints was investigated and found to be false," Agent Williams said. "That's a federal offense, man, and it carries serious penalties." Brittany looked genuinely startled. "4 complaints? I only filed 3. Agent Barrett paused mid-photo, tilting his head. "Actually, you filed 4. 1 under a different name, though you got the state code wrong on the form. That's what tipped us off to the pattern." "Wait," I said something. Slotting into place. "You mean this isn't just about me? She's been doing this to other people?" Agent Williams gave a slow, grim nod. "Miss Crow has been running a fraud scheme targeting legal gun owners across at least 3 counties. Fake HOA enforcement, forged documentation, demands for inspection fees. And when that didn't work, false federal reports designed to trigger raids so she could catalog valuables for later theft." He flipped to another page in his folder. "What makes it worse is her focus on veterans. She assumed military families would have high-value firearms and be less likely to challenge official-looking paperwork." Eleanor, still on the phone, stopped mid-sentence and stared up, her voice sharp. "That's disgusting. Going after people who served, there's a word for that. Un-American." Agent Barrett stepped back into the conversation, brushing dust from his jacket. "What's wild is how sloppy it all is. The surveillance rig, the business registration, the court orders, it's all barely credible. Just enough to fool someone not paying attention." He looked over at me, expression shifting to one of genuine respect. "The fact that you caught the inconsistencies so quickly and countered with surveillance of your own probably saved a lot of people." Brittany's voice came back, thin and cracking. I need a lawyer," she said, folding into herself. "I think I need a lawyer right now." "That's the smartest thing you've said all day," Officer Mallister said, closing his notebook. "And you're going to need a very good one. The list of charges is growing by the minute." Agent Williams began ticking them off on his fingers. Federal charges: filing false reports, wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy to defraud. State charges: impersonating law enforcement, document forgery, attempted extortion, unlawful surveillance. We're still counting. Each charge made Brittany seem smaller on my couch, like she was slowly deflating. Troy, sitting handcuffed on the floor, apparently thought now was a good time to flip. I can tell you where the rest of the targets are, he blurted. She has files, lists, photos, maps, everything. It's all in a storage unit on Riverside Drive. Brittany's head whipped around, eyes full of fire. You idiot, shut your mouth. Ma'am, Agent Williams cut in calmly. You may want to exercise your right to remain silent. That applies to both of you, but Troy was already committed. She's got stuff on like 20 families, schedules, property values, photos of homes, it's all cataloged. 2 hours later, my living room looked almost normal again. The storm had passed, though I had a feeling the ripple effects would linger. Brittany and Troy were on their way to the county jail. Mike and Sarah had been cleared after giving their statements. Eleanor had finished updating what sounded like half the county via phone, and the agents had packed up boxes of fake documents and surveillance gear that would become evidence in a wide-ranging fraud case. Sergeant, Barrett said as he packed up his kit. This was textbook counterintelligence. You saw the threat, gathered intel, controlled the situation, and gave us everything we needed to shut it down. Outstanding work. Agent Williams nodded, offering his card. We'll need your testimony, but given the evidence and their confessions, I don't expect a long trial. And if you ever want to come out of retirement, we'd be lucky to have someone with your skill set. They left shortly after, and Eleanor, never one to waste a dramatic opportunity, appeared with a plate of cookies and settled into my kitchen. The cookies, it turned out, had justice served written in icing. 3 months later, I was back in my garage cleaning the same Remington that started all this when I got a call from the prosecutor's office. Brittany had been sentenced to 3 years in federal prison, plus $180,000 in restitution to her victims. Troy got 18 months and a restraining order that barred him from coming within 500 feet of any of us. The storage unit had yielded evidence of expansion plans, 5 additional counties, dozens more potential victims who'd never even know how close they came. But for me, the biggest change came from the Heritage Hills HOA. They'd officially asked me to serve as their security consultant, a modest paycheck. Sure, but more than that, a way to keep my skills sharp and my neighbors safe. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my grandfather's old fountain pen, the one he used to write home from Europe in '44, and signed the contract. Heritage Hills Community Security Advisor. As I signed my name, I thought about how training and instinct can still matter in civilian life. How sometimes the lessons we pass on end up circling back. And how a neighborhood that watches out for each other is still the best line of defense. That's why I always tell my students, observe, assess, act. When you know how to use that at the right moment, nobody can run a con on you. Especially not one dressed up in Comic Sans and sealed with a rubber stamp off eBay. Ever dealt with neighbors like this? Drop a comment. I'll be reading them over coffee and my grandfather's Remington. You saw it. You felt it. Now go share it with someone who loves a good dose of suburban justice.